So we somehow end up doing this like serious thing about pickles that you find with your team. And today we're tackling a new one. So far we talked about burnout, we talked about micromanagement, overcommitting, groupthink. And today, this is the very last that we're tackling, that groupthink. And what it is, groupthink is that when team members conform to the opinions of others in the group rather than expressing their own ideas and expressing their own perspective. And that matters. Okay? So this is really another pickle that you want to watch out, because it really can spoil the broth for your team, for the product, for yourself. And it just goes really bland. So it matters because it lacks diversity. It matters because as it lacks diversity, the repercussions is that sort of lowers productivity and quality. Think about it. It really affects, it kills any innovation capability. And when I talk about innovation, very obvious term, is the ability to create, is the ability to create solutions, essentially to problem solve. And you need this. All right, so we know what it is, we know why it matters. Now, how can we spot it? So I'm going to give you a bit of indicators, a bit of a list. Right? This is not exhaustive, but those are things that you may want to keep an eye on, so you know if groupthink is sort of creeping in. The earlier you catch it and deal with it, the better. Now, the first one is that very very first thing of the ability to see that you lack diverse perspective. How do you know that? Well, maybe you can spot that only, or very often, or most often, only dominant voices are the ones that are heard. Is that the case? Does it happen in every meeting? What happens out of meetings? Another indicator is this idea of consensus without exploration. Sort of agree, and it's quick, but not thorough, shallow. Another thing you may want to keep an eye of is the avoidance of conflict. We're sort of reluctant to engage because we don't want conflict. It's not fun, is it? When conflict, in fact, and maybe we cover this another day, is the ability to challenge. When it's healthy conflict, can definitely help and surface for better. How you handle that, not so much. But anyway, let's not dive in. Indicators. Another indicator of groupthink is that your solutions are very homogeneous, because essentially we lack diverse thinking. Overconfidence is another one. Overconfidence because our past successes, because that overconfidence sort of disable us to be able to think critically, to critically evaluate things. Oh, don't know, it's fine. And last indicator, certainly not least, is the idea of confirmation bias. In itself, it's its own antipattern. So with the presence of these behaviors, you would really benefit from prompting the team to reflect and consider what are our ways, what the different options do we have to be able to foster a more open and more diverse environment. And for that, when we cover anti-patterns in this series, when we look at different indicators, another thing that we do cover is questions, right? Things that are powerful, yet very simple, that helps reflection. Because questions really act as a poke, opens possibilities, and ultimately you are there, they're there to serve the team. So a few questions that are good in this subject of groupthink to have in your back pocket. So when you're sensing maybe that's what's happening, ask. Any alternative viewpoints? You're creating the space, the opportunity for this to come out. The jumping into a solution without exploration, right? Consensus. There you maybe can ask, what would be one more option? Maybe you ask directly, how we rush to consensus on any issues or solutions? How can we encourage more varied perspective? How can we better handle conflicts constructively, especially if there is a bit of tension? Which options do we have to tackle this? Right? One piece of work or a goal, which options do we have? Options, sort of set from the start that there is more than one way. And then evaluate those options. How broad are they? How varied are they? Are those realistic even? How can we avoid deferring decisions solely to authority figures? And you see this very often. No? It's not for me to make a decision. It's not in my role. It's not in my pay grade. Okay, let's break free and own our own future. So how can we avoid the deferring decisions to external parties? What do we need to be able to do that? And when I say, authority figures like managers or product owners or whatever, what's stopping at that? That's probably a conversation in itself. One more question maybe in the subject that you could be asking is, what is one thing that will allow us to have more headspace and reduce noise this week? Groupthink sort of cripples in very often because it's sort of like conveyor belt of rush of life. So if you're enabling that headspace, you're enabling at least the space, the capability to be able to think beyond quick consensus. All right. Bunch of questions there from those indicators that you can be like filling in and see what bubbles up. Now, let's jump into the last section of these pickles, which is antidotes. Right? What are the antidotes that you can have at hand to tackle groupthink? One is this idea of making things anonymous. So how can you implement in your context, better than anybody else? Data collection, you can do that with games or with feedback mechanisms or whatever. I am sure that you have things at hand that's going to allow you, or it's going to allow team members to express their opinions. Once you gather that data, you sort of like become a mirror to the team, so you can generate insights from them. Group them, aggregate insights. Another antidote here is collaboration. And it's just such a good antidote for many things, isn't it? Because the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. At the end, you're a team for a reason. We are stronger together, especially when we feel stuck. Encourage the ability to pair up, to get a buddy, maybe this idea of the three amigos, right? So by default, we already make it more diverse. This ability of setting things in smaller groups, like the three amigos or the buddying app and stuff like that, also really helps for some of the voices that may not be as maybe confident is the word, inside the bigger settings to express their opinions. You'll see how smaller settings may give the opportunity or the environment for this to be heard. Another thing that is very healthy, in fact, is rotate the facilitation. Not just because it's good for everybody to go through the motions to see the experience from the facilitator perspective, which is not easy, and really we do take it for granted. Rotation of facilitation helps by avoid dominance of a particular single individual, and encourage varied approaches. We all have links and synergies to people in different ways. So it's just gonna sort of shake up a little bit and bring a different flavor and energy. So that is good in itself, of breaking free from complacency. So by encouraging those various sort of approaches of conducting the meetings, or the way that we express ourselves or prompt for questions, really help us to evaluate how decisions are made. Which sort of leads us to another one, which is check in on decision making. Two more antidotes here. Pre-mortems, when you're going to start something, as if you travel to the future. Encourage the team members to speak up about what we may hinder us along the way. What are the potential risks? Think about them early on. So, we can tackle them, or we can be prepared as if they flare. And the last, which is a constant theme of antidotes in the series, is the ability to measure. So how can you monitor and address the outline patterns of concern? Because addressing groupthink, you don't measure, you don't know. And addressing it, especially earlier on, it can really lead to a more creative, more robust, and more effective behavior. And that what drives is continuous improvement within the team. And that has its ripple effects to other teams, to other synergies, to the product. Yeah. So now it's your turn. Tell me, how do you tackle groupthink? And or what are you going to try? Or when you're trying these things, how's it going? All right, so thank you. Hope it's helpful. Let me know how it goes. Pop it in the comments, and I see you very soon.